Everyone thinks Jesus' first miracle was just about saving a wedding from embarrassment. But to the Jewish guest in that room, this miracle was shocking, possibly even offensive. Because those jars, they weren't for drinking, they were for purification. And when Jesus filled them with wine, he was making a bold statement no one could miss. This story is in John chapter 2. It happened at a wedding in Cana, and Jewish weddings weren't like ours. These things could last an entire week. Imagine the pressure on the family to host a week-long feast without running out of anything. And if you invited everyone to the wedding and then ran out of wine or anything else, it was a disgrace to you. A time of joy and honor could have quickly turned to shame. In verse 2, it tells us that Jesus and his disciples were invited. And that's important because most people don't get a miracle not because God doesn't love them, but because they don't invite him in. They try to do life alone. Jesus sent his disciples out 2 by 2 for a reason. You can't carry this journey by yourself. And it's not just about inviting Jesus in, it's inviting his disciples, fellow believers into your life. Being a week-long event, and everyone from both sides of the family and the entire village was invited, you can imagine trying your best to guesstimate how many people were going to be there. They just didn't figure out the numbers correctly. Here's why that mattered, though. First century Israel was an honor-shame society. Everything revolved around honor and shame. I talked about this more in my video on why Jesus turned the other cheek. So running out of wine wasn't just inconvenient. In Jewish culture, it would have brought deep shame on the family. This wasn't just a wedding crisis, it was a social disaster. Mary comes to Jesus, they have no wine. But watch his response. Jesus says, "Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." That sounds harsh in English, but in Greek, it was respectful. More like saying ma'am. Still, Jesus makes it clear. His miracles don't run on social pressure. They follow God's timing. And yet, Mary simply turns to the servants and says, whatever he says to do, do it. She doesn't argue, she doesn't plead, she trusts. And notice this other key to miracles. Whatever Jesus says, do it. Many people don't get their miracle, their answer from God, because they're not doing what Jesus said to do. That's obedience. It's trust. That's faith, and that's how miracles come. Now, here's where most people miss it. Verse 6 says that there were 6 water pots, 20 to 30 gallons each, used for the Jewish rites of purification. These weren't for drinking, they were for religious washing, for ritual, man-made ritual. Not from the law of Moses, the commandment of God, but just something else someone decided we should do, a man-made tradition. But Jesus says to take these water pots and fill them with water. And they do so. They fill the jars to the brim. Then Jesus tells them, draw some out and take it to the master of the feast. And suddenly, water becomes wine. Not cheap wine either. The master of the feast says, most people serve the best wine first, but you saved the best until now. Because when God does something, it's always better than what we could have done on our own. To the guest, those stone jars represented religious ritual, endless washing, endless rules, endless tradition. But wine? Wine symbolized joy, blessing, and covenant fellowship. Jesus was showing them and us something radical. He was taking what was empty ritual and filling it with overflowing joy. It wasn't just a miracle, it was a sign that he came to replace lifeless tradition with new life. Now, this is important. In Greek, the word for miracle is dunamis, a mighty work of God's power breaking into the natural world. But John calls this event a sign. In fact, throughout John's gospel, he calls miracles signs. He did that because he was making a point. Because the sign isn't about the act itself, it's about the message behind the act. Every sign is a miracle, but not every miracle is a sign. This sign was saying Jesus isn't here to patch up old rituals. He's here to transform them into something alive, joyful, and overflowing. This wasn't about keeping a wedding alive. It was about pointing to who Jesus really is, his mission, his glory, his identity. And the same invitation he gave at Cana, he gives us today. Trade what's empty for what only he can make overflow. Maybe you've been stuck in tradition without transformation, or maybe you've been running on empty. Jesus is saying, give me the jar you've been filling up with your own effort, and I'll turn it into something better than you could ever imagined. If teachings like this are opening your eyes to things you've never seen in Scripture before, make sure you're subscribed with the bell turned on, because next time we'll dive into another passage that's going to shake how you see Jesus' mission. You won't want to miss it. So the wedding at Cana wasn't just about wine, it was a sign. Jesus takes what's empty and fills it with joy. And if this miracle surprised you, you have to check out this other video on why Jesus doesn't know the hour of his return. It's because of a wedding as well. And his first century listeners understood what he was saying loud and clear. The answer isn't what you think. Click here to watch now. Thank you for joining me. Stay blessed, and I will see you next time.